3, 2. Hi there, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Unique Genius in 33. I am super excited to be here today with a friend of mine from the other side of the pond over in Spain, who has been someone I've known for a couple of years now and just is a delight to chat with. And when it came to intellection, which we're going to be talking about today, I have to say she's got such a beautiful expression of it. And it can be one of those tough talents that are out there, I think, where we can kind of look at the dark side sometimes without really celebrating what it's all about. And so I'm super excited to have Mercedes with us today. So Mercedes, will you do us a favor and introduce yourself, your top 5 talents, and tell us a little bit about you?
Sure. First of all, thank you very much for having me, Joe. It's a pleasure to share this time with you, and nice to have the opportunity to work with you. So I'll give you my top 5 first, and obviously my top one is intellection. The second is connectedness. Third is empathy. Fourth is input, and 5 is deliberate. I am living in Spain, and I have my own coaching, coaching and consulting company called Soul Whisper Coaching. I've been doing this for in different sort of dimensions for about 5 or 6 years from here. And let's see, what else? I'm a psychologist by training. But before that, I was an economist, so I kind of switched around a little bit, but that's the way that's the way life works. And I don't know if anything else that you want me to say.
Did I miss it, or did you say you were an avid sailor?
Oh, yes. I moved.
Come on, how can you leave that out?
Yeah. Yeah, it's true. And that does give me a lot of, sailing is so related to the way I live my life. And I use it a lot in metaphors and in coaching, because you can always, you can't control the wind, but you can change your sails. And so a couple of years ago, I moved to a little town outside of Barcelona, which is right on the beach, and I go sailing every weekend. So, yeah, I use that a lot in how I do a lot of my business. So thank you for bringing that up. Yeah.
Oh, no, I'm like, did I miss it? Was I not listening? Because I know that's such a big part of you. And I think it is I'm sure it'll come up as we converse, but I know that's gonna, that it really is very representative of sort of your talents and how you show up and how you, the things that fill your bucket, right? So I think that was really important to bring up. And the other thing is, I love that the name of your business is Soul Whisper, because again, that's where I see so much of the beauty of what you offer, because you and I are so different in the way we listen to people and the way we help people. And I love that, right? That's what we need out there in the world. We can't be everything to everyone. So I just want to recognize the beauty of what you have. So before we get started, I'm going to share that Gallup's definition of intellection is: people exceptionally talented in the intellection theme are characterized by their intellectual activity. They are introspective and appreciate intellectual discussions. So, Mercedes, we always celebrate and evaluate our talents on here because we want to look at practical applications and what's really great about us. And then also some questions we can ask ourselves in case we're getting on the dark side of our talent or maybe not at our highest level, right? So to celebrate for intellection, we want you to celebrate your depth and profoundness for understanding, your philosopher's mindset, the ability to have deep and meaningful conversations, and your ability to move slowly. Does that sound like you?
That sounds exactly like me. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think one of the things that I appreciate most about the kind of work I do and who I am is that I really like to have deep conversations with people and get to know people very deeply and intimately. And connectedness is my second one. So I think they go really well together because I do like people. I know that intellection, people tend to isolate, which I do sometimes too. But it's because I need thinking time and I need to reflect and I need to go deep into it. But yeah, definitely.
So moving right into evaluate, you just tapped into my very first question was, am I isolating myself? Am I thinking about the right things Am I getting frustrated with others who might be moving faster than I do? Am I building walls or emotional barriers to keep others at arm's length?
Yeah. Yeah, I definitely the part about getting frustrated with people that move faster than I do. I think that, so we value very much go-getters and people that move quickly and that do things very quickly. And at times I really get, I can feel like, I'm not smart enough, or I'm not moving as quickly as they are, or, I wish I could make this process faster. But then I start
Sure.
to think that, I see things from a lot of different perspectives, and I make connections that maybe people that are much faster miss out on. And I think a lot of people say to me, "Oh, I hadn't thought about that." So things like this
Like,
that happen.
long and hard.
Exactly.
Right.
So yeah. And then you were saying about the isolation. Well, you were talking about sailing, particularly with sailing. I go on the boat with between 5 and 8 people, and sometimes it's just too much for me. Sometimes it's just I need to come home, relax, get away from them. I get frustrated with the chit chat that goes on, or with the sort of things that happen, because I just need to get away. I sometimes I think it's isolation, but other times I just think it's overstimulation. And I think maybe it also has to do with sensitivity. I do get, I am sensitive to the stimulus, and so I need to calm down. And I think that goes hand in hand for me with intellection. It doesn't necessarily have to be the case with everybody, but it does happen to me. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, certainly I can see empathy and connectiveness coming into play there, right? Like that would be a big influencer on how your intellection shows up and what it means, right? I can absolutely see that. So tell me, that being said, what do you love about your intellection? How does it bring you joy?
What do I love? Well, I mean, I love the fact that, when I was younger, one of the questions that came up was, who portrays intellection to you? And I always like the philosophers. And so I always like the feeling that, that I'm deep, that I can have deep conversations, that I really can understand people. I love sort of the meaning, to find meaning in life. It's not just do, but be. What is the meaning of all of this that we're living, that we're seeing, that we're experiencing? How does it all connect to each other? What is the purpose of why we're here? Also, that idea of seeing things from different angles, and that's what kind of makes me slow, maybe, is that I can see it from this point of view or from that point of view. And it can also lead to indecision, because you're seeing things from so many different points of view. But then when you finally decide, and when you finally come up, you just have this feeling that you've thought it out, and that it's really what is right, or what you want to do, or that it's not something that you just said, okay, let's just do it because I don't care. I care about everything. I think everything, I think out everything. And then once I make the decision, I'm comfortable with that.
Yeah. Great. I love that. And so if we were to flip the coin over, where do you feel like intellection can trip you up or be cumbersome for you?
Overthinking, ruminating, that period when you're confused because you're thinking everything out so deeply. That what you mentioned before of being slow, the absent-mindedness, like I'll be doing something and then I'll start thinking about something else. And so then, it's like, what was I thinking? What was I supposed to do? Or, why am I in this room? And what was it that, because there's so many thoughts going on at the same time. So it takes some discipline, right? To think, okay, I have to concentrate on one thing at a time, or I have to really sort of focus. I think that focus aspect is something that I think about all the time. Okay, you've got to focus on one thing, not 10,000 thoughts coming in at the same time.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So, you know, a lot of people talk about intellection, you know, you talked about that little bit of needing the isolation and, you know, the overstimulus and everything like that. My husband happens to have intellection as his number one as well. And I have learned that I can't say, you know, what would you like for dinner and expect an answer right then. Like I have to ask it in the morning, and maybe by, you know, 4 o'clock he would have an answer, and I have to let him know, like, you have this long to think about something. Right. Because I do need an answer. You can't keep going through the answer. And so it's been really interesting for me, because in our conversations, and maybe this comes up for you, I'd be curious if this is just an intellection or if it's a combination of other things. I tend to be a very black and white answer and question asker sometimes. And I try very hard not to ask just yes or no questions, but sometimes, like, you know, would you like to go out this evening? I need a yes or a no, right? Like there, to me, it's like, if it's yes, then we explore it. If it's no, then we go, okay, great, then we'll do something else, right? For him, and it drives him nuts that I answer questions yes or no. And I'm like,
yes or no questions are easy for me, you know, because I sort of, it's, you have two choices. It's that gray area that makes it so much more difficult. You know, it would be like, where do you want to go for dinner? Do you want to go Chinese? Do you want to go Thai? Do you want to go Italian? That kind of thing is like, but it's like, do you want meat or vegetables for dinner? That would be easy because it's only two choices.
Right. Well, see, and I tend to give him two choices to do that, but then he'll always throw a third or a fourth or a fifth. And he just keeps expanding. And I'm like, you know, I've already narrowed it down to these two. Can we stick with these two options? And he's just like, I need more time. I need more time. And he'll do, you know, and if I say, do you want to go out tonight? It's like, well, he'll verbally process, well, I have to get this done, and I have to do this, and I have to get that done, and this is on my plate, and if I get this done by this time, then maybe we can do, and I'm just like, I don't need the internal dialogue.
I relate to him.
Right? Like, I don't need the internal dialogue. Okay.
I do that too. It's like, in fact, somebody invited me to dinner tonight, and this was yesterday, and it was like, well, I don't know, because I have this interview, because of this, because of that, and then finally I just said, okay, I'll go to dinner, you know. And so then once that decision is made, then it's okay. But yeah, I can relate to what he's talking about.
Okay. Yeah, good. Because I mean, I think a lot, but I don't think in the same way. So it's always been, you know, one of those things where I've kind of learned how to work with his way. He's still trying to figure out my way of communicating, right? Like we haven't quite found that piece yet. But okay, cool. So you mentioned that, you know, even as a young person, you used to like to really relate to the philosophers and stuff. Do you have any kind of examples of how intellection showed up for you as a young girl or a young woman, even before you knew that was a talent?
Yeah. Well, besides the fact that, you know, ever since I can remember, people would tell me that I was thinking too much. And that these were the things that I, you know, the reading and studying and philosophers and having discussions with people. I've always been that way. And the other day I was talking to a friend of mine who I've known since I was 14. And I said to her, my children are deep thinkers. And she said, that's no surprise, because you were always like that, you know. And so when I was 14, it was, you know, I wasn't like into romance novels. I was more into like Buddhism and things like that, you know, more philosophically oriented.
Typical teenage stuff.
Yeah. So, yeah, it's always, and sometimes I would think, you know, you go through periods of darkness, not to say depression, but of darkness. And I always wondered, is it because I think things so much, you know, that I get myself into like a spider's web, you know, that and people would say, no, if you would only relax, or if you'd be less serious, or if you don't think as much, you'd be happier. And maybe it's true as a teenager. I don't think it's true for me now, because I like to think. You know,
Sure.
I like to figure these things out, and I like uh, to think things through. I get tired when people are not thinkers, or are shallow, or are always happy, or whatever. Because I think life is happy and sad. You know, it's
Right.
both.
Right.
So,
You want to be able to ponder all of those things, right? And
right.
explore them deeply,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I can appreciate that. I can definitely appreciate the need of a serious and meaningful conversation, right? Not the chit chat, not the
Yeah.
superficial
Yeah,
stuff.
and when you were talking about the dark side of it, you know, like cocktail parties or chit chat parties,
Mm-hmm.
you know, I tend to be okay for a few minutes, but then I start thinking of something else, and I lose track of what the person was saying, or I get bored with the conversation, or things like that. And it really takes an effort to be the other way. And I think that's
Yeah.
what's important about strengths, is that you have a way of being that comes
Mm-hmm.
naturally to you. And then um, because we live in a real world, you have to sort of adjust to how other people react, and what situations you're in. So yeah,
Sure.
cocktail parties are a pain in the neck for me. They really are.
Believe it or not, I have woo, and I'm not a fan either. In some weird level, I like intimate dinner parties where I know people.
Yeah.
I don't like big parties, and I think that's my woo relator kind of thing. Like, you know, it's not an election, but it is that sense of I want a deeper connection with people. I
Yeah.
don't need the superficial connection. So even though I have woo, I'm not a party person. I never have been. I've never been a party person, you know,
Yeah,
in
I
my life.
mean, parties are okay, and what usually ends up happening is that I meet one or two people at a party, but I don't network the whole room. You know, I end up
Right.
like finding somebody who is interesting to me, and I spend quite a bit of time with that person. And then,
Sure.
not to be like, you know, heavy, I sort of go on to another person, but I'm never the real, what do they call them? Room worker?
I throw the people in a room together. I introduce them, tell them why they should like each other, what they have in common, and then I go hide myself in the kitchen. Like I don't even stay. I just throw
Yeah.
it all together and go, all right, you all take it from here, and I'll be over here cooking and doing whatever I need to do. And I love
Yeah.
that. I used to do Christmas dinners like that. I would invite random strangers to my house for Christmas dinners, um, and a lot of them are still friends. I see them connecting on Facebook, and I don't talk to most of them. Like I mean, but like we're friends on Facebook, right? But I don't
Yeah.
have these deep
Yeah.
relationships. They've created some, so it's been fun. It's interesting to see that.
But it is true. It takes, I mean, we had something like this happen at Christmas here. Is a friend of mine who loves to cook. He sort of decided to have the party at my house, and he invited people I didn't even know. And it was great because I didn't have any responsibility to entertain them and to chit chat with them and
Yeah,
to whatever, you know, so that works fine.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Nice.
Yeah.
Okay, so I think you've probably hit on some, you know, some pretty specific points, and especially with what you say, you know, people tell you think too much and that kind of thing. What would you what would you want someone to know that doesn't have an election? Like, what are your needs? What would you want them to know so that you could help alleviate any misunderstandings or hard feelings?
What would I want them to know? Um, I think I'd want them to know that that I, whatever they say, I'm listening to it, and that I'm thinking about it, and that I'm taking it in. You know, that I'm like evaluating what they're saying, and I'm concerned that I understand what they're saying, and yeah. Also, that I'm not bored with them. You know, because a lot of times it's. You know, this idea of not being fast enough. You're with somebody and they kind of want jokes or something like that, and you know, it most of the time that doesn't really happen. um what else? Yeah, it's really important to me that people um want to have that kind of deep connection uh with me, and it's sort of like I don't want the superficial friends. So,
Right.
yeah.
So if somebody
Yeah.
says to you, oh, Mercedes, you just think too much. Why are
Yeah.
you always in your head? What would you love to say to that person?
Um, because that's the way I make sense out of my life.
Yeah. You need time, right? Like, it's not that you
Yeah.
can't give an answer, it's that you need time.
Yeah. And I need time to recuperate from events.
Right.
Some people can, like, I don't know, go to I mean, I just came back from a funeral. So some people can just come back from a funeral and be, just like nothing happened. For me, I need the time to process it and then get back into daily routine.
Right.
Because if I don't process it, then I feel uncomfortable. I feel overwhelmed. I feel
Sure.
sad.
Sure.
Yeah.
Oh, I can appreciate that. So probably even a certain part of, relationship of just really setting those boundaries of, that you need your space and some alone time and that time to process and to not take that personally, right? It's not
Right.
because you don't want to spend time with that person, but just that you actually need a little bit of physical space to do the processing and thinking that you do. Would
Yeah.
that be true?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that aspect of needing time alone, particularly in relationships, that sort of going into your room and being alone for a while, that's really important to me.
Right.
Yeah.
So, okay, perfect. So the fun question, famous person or fictional character, someone that represents intellection for you.
When people ask me these questions, I always come up with that Snoopy character, the Linus. Remember
Oh,
Linus, who played the
yeah.
piano, and he was like really in his head, and
Schroeder, who played the piano,
Schroeder,
right?
yeah,
Schroeder.
yeah, yeah. I think, was it Schroeder or Linus who was really the intellect, very quiet guy and whatever.
Linus
Anyway,
was Lucy's brother who always walked around with the blanket, but he did
right.
philosophize. And then Schroeder was the one who played the piano.
Yeah. So
yeah.
them and I think the famous people would be well, I mean, one of my favorite philosophers back then was Kierkegaard.
Okay.
Soren Kierkegaard, real humanist and very deep thinker, but with a lot of empathy and a lot of love for people, and not so metaphysical as some of the others. So yeah, I can't really think of who today would be like that, because I don't know. I don't watch TV
okay.
or
It could be somebody in the past, but Linus, I think, because you said Linus because he didn't play the piano, but Linus was always sort of the voice of reason.
The voice of reason. That's
right?
what I think. Yeah.
When Charlie Brown was like freaking out or having whatever, Linus was always the one who sort of could calm him down and voice of reason and think through what was really happening.
So it was Linus, and he would calm everybody down.
Yeah, because Schroeder didn't talk very much. Schroeder was just the piano player. That Lucy was in love with.
But I think it's that if I were to say, like, ask people how they see me, is that I think most people feel like I slow them down and calm them down. So when somebody comes to me and they're like that, it's it's okay. Take it easy. Let's think about this. Let's calm down. Let's see what the situation really is. Not what we're making up. Not what we want it to be. Not what we wish it was. But where are we standing and where do we want to go? Calmly, slowly thinking about it.
Well, and when we did our work together, you bringing that up, when we did our work together, one of the things I love that you came up with as you were talking about is that you're able to bring people into their own wisdom.
Yeah, that's really important to me, because I'm not there to tell people what they have to do. I'm there to help them see who they are and what they want to do and which is the best way for them to be. And that, I think, is wisdom.
Well, and I think you have the patience, to listen to the whole story, right? And take it all in. So I think for those people who need their own time to process, their own time to move through it, at that pace, I think you're a perfect person to take them through that. And those people that need to slow down a little bit can tap into your energy for slowness,
Yeah.
which sounds like a strange thing to put energy and slowness in the same sentence, but that vibe that you put off, right? That it's okay to.
Yeah. Well, there is energy in meditation. I mean, we're into meditation these days, right? Everybody is meditating. So that is slowing down and being calm and not so busy and not so, and there's a lot of wisdom in that, in living that way.
Right. Right. So talk to me a little bit about sailing and how sailing fuels you, what you love about it.
Yeah. Gosh, I don't know. It's like when I'm at the sea and I'm very much connected to nature, and so you have all the elements when you're out at sea. You have the water, you have the wind, you have the, everything, and I just I'm usually with other people, which is interesting. But you're in control of where you're going, and you have the movement. Sometimes I just sort of sit there and move to the waves, and it's just like, in a way, like being cuddled. It's just like there's a movement to it, and then there's the freshness of the wind. It's a very mystical thing for me. It's more than just a sport. It's a real connection to the spiritual side of me.
Nice. I love that. So we're starting to wrap up a little bit. And the last thing I love to talk with people, and I know I just threw that question at you. Shame on me for someone with intellection who would want time to think about it. Strengths. Strengths. You've been in strengths for a little while. So what do you think other people, how would other people benefit by knowing their strengths? What has it done for you? And why do you think other people should learn what their strengths are?
I think it really helps you to accept yourself. I think it, when you know that this is, I would have never, well, that's not true. I was going to say I would have never put all these thinking aspects to it, because I always think of thinking as strategic, and I don't think I'm very strategic. But then when I learned about intellection, I thought, yeah, that really defines who I am. And it, when I've used strengths with other people, they've seen themselves very clearly in the definitions, and it just kind of gives you a really good structure to make sense of who you are and what your natural sort of tendencies are. I don't know, it's hard to describe, but yeah, it makes a lot of sense to me that also if you know your strengths and you know somebody else's strengths, you know how to connect with them in a different way.
Sure.
Because you know where they're coming from. You understand what they're perceiving.
Right. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being here today. I've loved having this conversation with you. It is always a joy to spend time with you and your calming presence, because I am definitely a higher energy person. So I can always benefit from a little bit of calming down myself. So thank you so much for sharing your intellection with us today. And for those of you who are out there listening, I just want to remind you that we're here every Wednesday at 11:30 Central, 12:30 p.m. Eastern. And we're here live, so you can ask your questions if you want to. Otherwise, we hope you enjoy downloading and listening to the recording. Beyond that, we also have our 1-minute briefings. We have our 1-minute podcast on strengths that is now also on iTunes. So be sure to look for us as Strong Communities on iTunes and get your daily 1-minute dose of strengths knowledge. Thank you so much, Mercedes, and I look forward to seeing everyone next week.
Great. Bye-bye.